concept of that particular problem. So again, that's something that I think has to come from within.
Yeah, I often say to people when they talk about how the Ouija board is bad or they had a bad experience, I say, like, okay, so we get on the phone and you and I, we have this conversation and it gets really nasty and we call each other names and say horrible things about each other, and then we hang up the phone. When we're done with the conversation, you don't take your cell phone and throw it out the window and say, I will never have one of these in my house again.
Right, exactly.
But what happens with a Ouija board, you have a bad conversation and it's like, boom, that thing's like a,
Because that's everybody's natural instinct to get rid of the thing that just produced evil or suspense.
With it taking themselves out of the equation, where it's, I often say people should look at who's communicating. The board is not. The board is just the telephone that you're using. You're communicating with something else, and somehow the board is the evil thing, or what has happened, or what has gone wrong. Just fascinating.
It's a perfect example of how fear has blocked forward thinking.
When Poltergeist came out, the movie, how many people across America covered up their television screens before they went to bed with a blanket because they were so afraid in the middle of the night that screen was going to pop on? It's just all superstition.
And we've solved that problem with satellite and cable TV where there's no white noise anymore.
Right?
It's always going.
Why are all these people running around possessed now?
What do you guys think about this idea that, from quantum physics, the hardest science you really can get, they'll talk about the idea that thoughts are reality, or this slit experiment where the observer changes the nature of an atom, or the entanglement idea where an atom separated, an electron separated from another electron a million miles away. If you do something to one electron, it affects the other. So what do you think of this idea that perhaps the Ouija board is a great example of the placebo effect, where thoughts are becoming reality, and this is kind of a tool to do that? Any thoughts on that at all?
How do I word that into a question to start that out? Give me an example of how I should start that sentence out.
Is it a tool for bringing? Is it an actualizer for reality? Can it make thoughts into things?
Okay. I've often wondered if the Ouija board can affect our thoughts. If our thought... Did I just say that backwards?
Yeah, backwards. Yeah.
Okay, let's start that off.
It definitely can affect your thoughts, right?
A woman answering a question with a question?
All right, shut up.
You even got the film guy laughing on that one.
I've often wondered if our thoughts can manipulate a Ouija board session, so subconscious messages could come through. However, physically, when I've gotten success with a Ouija board and a planchette, the answers that came out had nothing to do with me. They were names being pulled out on the board, dates, usually unusual circumstances about a person's death. That's how they usually present themselves, with circumstances of how they passed, to talk about them a little bit. And then my session experiences tend to lead into question and answer. Then it's about me. What kind of answers am I going to get out of this, to sort of just to throw it out there, because everybody does it. They start answering, am I going to be rich? Am I going to fall in love? Questions like that. But subconscious thoughts, in my experiences, I've never seen come through on a Ouija board. I don't think that really the spirit that's communicating with you is worried about what's in our head, because when the sessions start off, again, they're talking about themselves. Do I believe that they could absolutely get in our head? Yes. Because that spirit does know specific answers to questions that we're asking that only we would know. That's a fact. And it's unpredictable. It doesn't happen every time on cue, but just my experiences only, they're very knowledgeable, whoever's speaking to us, as far as what may happen. And it's random. Are they going to talk about your friends? Are they going to talk about how many people are in your bedroom at the time? It's bizarre, because you don't know what they're going to say. I just have to add, I know I'm going off the subject, but I don't want to not talk about this. What was amazing during a Ouija board session that we were filming was the planchette was moving about the board. So one of the investigators said, can you spell out your name? And with our eyes, we saw it go to an R, and then we saw it move to an I, and then a C. And it spelled out the name Richard. Upon reviewing the audio tapes later on, all of our recorders caught this. It was amazing. Before it started going out to the R and the I and the C, you heard a man say, Richard. And And then the planchette started to spell an R and I. So there's an actual process of steps. The spirit speaks physically, which we may or may not catch. It depends if you're recording or not. But the same night, it happened again with the name George. What is your name? Started to spell a G and then an E, and you heard the man say, George, in a completely different man's voice, where there was no men present during the session. Absolutely unbelievable. And so that thought process, there's steps, you know, it actually, we were able to hear the spirit speaking physically and then taking the energy to move the planchette. So how is that possible that that might have been coming from our minds? We weren't thinking George or Richard. Somebody was actually speaking it that we couldn't hear with our ears and then moving it. So that was just completely a message coming from its own. Neat. It was neat. I've never seen anything like it when that happened.
A lot of people talk that Ouija boards open up doors or portals. Do you believe that a Ouija board opens up doors or portals? And do you think, where do you think those are? Are they in you? Are they in the board? What's happening? You know what I mean?
I hate going on hearsay though. Like a lot of this, because I haven't experienced it myself, as hearsay. You know, I've heard the stories of people using a Ouija board and that they've possibly opened up a portal or some kind of vortex. If they did that, in my opinion, I feel that the spirits were already there. It depends on the situation. It's very possible that someone may have, during a session, invited something, again, to come and happen. I don't feel that the typical Ouija board user is just going to open up a portal or vortex. It's a very, very, very deep, phenomenal situation I don't know enough about to honestly answer. Do I feel that this happens every time? No. Why would certain households have portals and some other? What is a portal? Do I believe that the human, the person themselves becomes a portal? No. Then you would see them, you would actually see the person showing symptoms of having some other kind of spiritual warfare going on, which doesn't happen. In my studies, I've seen pictures of portals. I've heard audio of portals, and these are coming from some pretty big experts in the field, in the field of EVP. Consults from the movie White Noise. The woman, it was an amazing lecture, and she showed me the first photograph I've ever seen of an actual portal, and we heard the audio that went along with it. It was amazing to me. And I still look at that and say, that's impossible. How is that possible? This weird energy thing. There's a whole other realm that I have to learn about. But that portal was a physical portal. That portal was there, outdoors, that she showed us. It was not created by Ouija board use. But some people believe all around me that if you go into a cemetery, we just learned this the other day, you know, there was some satanic activity and satanic worship. So it may have opened up a portal for something to come and go. Yes, no, I don't know the answer to that, if that happened or not. I don't know. We can't see portals. We don't know about them. So there may be one behind you. There may be a portal in the Leominster Library we don't know about. But again, with maybe some further research in the field, we can learn more about that. Does the Ouija board open doors? We don't know.
I want to go back to your original question. Is there any validity to the subconscious activating the conscious or reality? And, you know, again, it either is or it isn't, but there's a lot that lends to thinking that, how do you know that there isn't something in another dimension right here that's influencing your subconscious? And I truly believe that the subconscious can be influenced to the conscious, because there's so many. Look at advertising. Look at how subliminal advertising. You could watch the worst commercial and hate it, but you still remember it. And why? Why does it stick in your head so much? There's so many things that influence our brain and what we perceive. You know, it's one of God's jokes, if you will, perception. You know, perception being reality. You know, to you it's wonderful, to somebody else it's terrible. And I always use the analogy, in some countries, people love dogs. We pet them, we keep them, we love them. In some countries, people eat dogs. In both countries, that's completely acceptable behavior. Why is that? We're both human beings with 2 eyes, 2 arms, 2 legs. How can we think so drastically differently without the influence of perception in the subconscious.
And another thing to add, as far as, do they open up doorways? Do they bring trouble to our typical household, let's say? I get calls to investigate people's homes. They didn't have Ouija boards. They'd never used a Ouija board. Yet there's paranormal activity going on in the home. So hence, if they didn't use a Ouija board and never did in their entire lives, and there's a lot of people out there that haven't, then what opened up those doors? What brought that spirit in? We'll never know.
Yeah, I don't think the bad guy in the whole scenario of opening portholes is a Ouija board. I think there's a thin veil between our existence and the existence on the other side, and there's always breaches going on everywhere for so many different reasons that you can't just focal point it on a Ouija board for being the sole purpose of that, sole influence of that.
You getting tired?
That's perfect. No, I'm just thinking about it.
In your research and like cases you've gone in, to take up your point, many of them, there was no Ouija board involved. Any time that there was one involved that you remember, that you want to talk about, where you think that was the causation perhaps of the haunt?
Oh, like on a haunting case?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Talk about that?
There was a case that I did, a paranormal case. We got a call many years ago in Western Massachusetts, and a man had called us in because there was a myriad of different problems going on in the house. He was hearing voices, things were being moved, there were shadows left and right out of the corners of his eyes. And upon arriving at the destination, we did a second interview on camera. Now we do, of course, the initial interview vocally on the phone to find out if there are any medications involved, mental illness, all of the above. We even want to know about their history with occult use, you know, reading, any kind of weird books laying around, anything that might have attachments. We go into antiques around the house, any vintage items that may carry energy. The initial interview was very benign, very clean cut. When we sat down with this gentleman at his home, now we noticed the home was not clean. That might not be unusual to people, however, I'm thinking something's a little off. And during the interview, he mentioned, oh, and I have this great collection up in my attic of occult books that I paid $500 for online. A lot of them on eBay that he purchased were 500-year-old manuscripts of, you know, satanic Bibles and things in different languages. And my first question was, have you read these? He says, well, yeah, I've read them, but it's not like I do the rituals. I said, but you read them. In your mind, you were repeating back the steps of the rituals. And he had no idea what I was getting at, not knowing that just reading this information and processing it through your head, you're opening up some doors. You know, any kind of, it's tough to delve into, but anytime your mind is already that wide open, you've exposed yourself to that, I do feel like a door is opening there in the realm. And he then proceeded to tell us about what else he had up in the attic. And he had Ouija boards up there. And he said he hadn't touched them in 20, 30 years, and he didn't believe that the cause of the hauntings in his home were due to the Ouija board use, but they were just packed up in boxes, so out of sight, out of mind. And then upon learning further, he was on major medications for psychotics. He was hearing voices as we were sitting there in his right ear saying to us, can you hear that? Can you hear that? And of course, we're all looking around the room saying,